Welcome to Political Perspectives. I'm Hugo Gurdon, Editor-in-Chief of the Washington Examiner. Since the last episode of Political Perspectives, the country has lived through perhaps, certainly, one of the most extraordinary weeks in American political history. There's been an attempted assassination of Donald Trump, former president and the nominee for the Republican Party to take over the White House again, to return to the White House. It's one of those epochal moments, one of those hinges of history. And here to talk about it with me today, as usual, is Byron York, Chief Political Correspondent, who is at the convention. Byron, talk a little bit about the scale of what we have experienced in the last week.
Well, conventions are fairly big in themselves, but the assassination attempt has just changed this entire convention in the sense that it's on everybody's mind because they are so rare. I mean, obviously, Ronald Reagan was shot in 1981, not long after he took office. And before that, a woman took a shot at Jerry Ford in the 1970s, didn't get anywhere close to actually hitting him. And before that, you had assassinations in 1968. So that's a long time ago. And as a matter of fact, it was interesting talking to some people around the convention. They had looked back to 1968 as a year in which everything was just absolutely crazy. And it almost seemed as if the wheel were going to fly off the axle. And they've always said that now, it's very divided. People are very angry with each other. There's a lot of division, but it's not that bad. But after the assassination attempt, some of them began to worry that maybe we're getting there. So that hangs over the entire convention.
Right. So Byron, let's have a look now at the hero's welcome and of Trump arriving at the RNC. There's a really revealing clip. Let's have a look at that.
If tomorrow all the things were gone, I'd work for all my life, and I had to start again, just my children and my wife. So,
Byron, I'd like you to talk about what we see in that clip. Now, you have spent time with President Trump, both before the assassination, you were with him at Mar-a-Lago, and you spent several evenings with him and talked to him and interviewed him. And then you were on the plane with him flying to the convention. Talk a little bit about what we're seeing in that clip there, and that you're writing a major feature for the Washington Examiner magazine of the Trump before and after the assassination attempt. Talk about what we're seeing and the way in which this has changed him, or at least changed his approach to the presidential campaign.
Yeah, well, starting with after, on that first night of the convention, I saw a look on Trump's face that I'd really never seen in public before, which is he's clearly very emotional. And Trump, in his speeches, can just kind of run the gamut of personalities. He can be angry, he can be funny, but I really haven't seen that kind of emotion. And it was actually quite consistent with what I saw on the plane with him. We flew on Sunday evening before the convention began, flew from Newark to Milwaukee. And this was 24 hours or less than after he had been shot. And it was very clear that he was trying to process what had happened. It was so recent, and it was so monumental. And he talked over and over again about the position of his head at the moment the shot was fired, because he said, I usually speak, I'm at the lectern, I'm facing the audience, and I'm speaking. But on this occasion, he had brought a visual aid, a big sign that had statistics about immigration, and he was looking up over to his right to look at the sign. And the sign was also elevated. It was hanging from a crane at the site. And so he was looking up and over to his right. And at that instant, the bullet grazes his ear. And he knows that if he were facing just a little more forward or if he was facing in his normal posture, facing the crowd, it would have been instantly fatal. So, that gets you to thinking. And he was just kind of replaying that over and over. And he was actually, there's a big screen TV in Trump Force One, and newscast would come on, and he watched video of himself being shot and was just amazed. And so it's all been something, a process of trying to digest and understand what has just happened to him.
Yeah. And it's not just a change in the demeanor, but he told you, and he told Selena Zito, another one of our reporters, that he had, in consequence of the shooting, he had ripped up his original, the speech that he intended to give at the convention, and he had rewritten it entirely. And what we had immediately after the shooting, and presumably what is going to be in the speech, is much more sober. It's less aggressive, perhaps, and it calls for national unity. There's a lot of talk of unity. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, that is the most sort of amorphous concept of the entire convention, because yes, Trump said he had a speech prepared and it was done that he called a real rip-roarer. He said it was going to be brutal, really tough. So it was going to be, political combat. And of course, that is characterized Trump's 8 years in presidential politics. So it's going to be more of that. And then he has this realization on the night that he is shot that he just can't do that. He feels like he can't come up and just be the old Trump, just letting him have it from the stage. And so they began work immediately, literally within hours of the shooting. They began work on a new speech to be more unifying. Now, here's the thing. I think some of this is the short-term reaction, because, just think, anytime something big has happened to you in your life, it takes you a while to kind of digest it, process it, and you go through various stages. So I think part of this is that. And on the other hand, it has been very unifying. The word unity certainly applies to the convention, because the Republicans are already united behind Trump, and now they're even more so. It certainly hardened, solidified, the unity among Republicans. But as far as creating a greater unity in the country, that is something that really I think you have to look at skeptically, given the last 8 years. And I just, how does Trump do that? After, for example, the Russia investigation, and after he has called a Russian agent, a Russian asset, time after time after time. How do you unify after that? After all of the legal cases against him?
I think that it's going to be very, very. It's not something.
It's a crazy idea.
Yeah, I think it's not something that he can necessarily achieve, but it's a very interesting change in tone, and is likely to affect the way that people regard him if he manages to sustain and maintain that new demeanor. And my guess is that it would probably help him with some of those who are independents, who are pretty much on the fence about him, but who were horrified by Joe Biden's mental meltdown in debate. And I'd like to turn our attention now to Trump's opponent, President Biden, because although most of the news has been and the focus has been on President Trump, President Biden has been out there trying to, campaign. And one of the major features of the campaign that he has done is an interview with NBC's Lester Holt. Now, this did not go very well for him because, well, let's have a look at some of at a couple of clips from that, and then we can talk about it.
What happens if another?
Yeah, what happens if you have another performance on that on that level?
I don't plan on having another performance on that level. The idea that I'm the old guy, I am. I'm old. But I'm only 3 years older than Trump, number one. And number two, my mental acuity has been pretty damn good. Sometimes come and talk to me about what we should be talking about.
All right.
Okay, the issues.
So what we saw there, Byron, was President Biden continuing to stumble over his words, which to some extent has been a characteristic all his life. He has a stutter, but it has obviously got considerably worse. he does this odd thing now of whispering, and he did quite a bit of that with Lester Holt. But very notably, he was annoyed by the questions that he was being asked. Lester Holt was asking him about the debate and his poor performance, and Joe Biden was saying, "Why aren't you asking about all the lies that Donald Trump, spoke in that debate?" Ignoring, of course, the fact that there were plenty of falsehoods from the president himself. This was not a good look for Biden. It was both angry and upset on the one hand, and kind of mumbling and incompetent on the other. And the gap in perceptions between him and Trump over the course of the last week, with Trump getting up from the floor after being shot and raising his fist in a salute to the rally, and indeed to the nation, with blood on his face and looking strong and dynamic, and this very feeble and grouchy old president, the contrast could hardly be sharper, could it?
No, it couldn't. And Biden did look terrible. I mean, but he was very defensive about his having spoken 5 days before the assassination, telling a group of donors that I'm done talking about the debate. It's time to put Trump in a bullseye. Now, he did not mean that he thought Trump should be shot, but it is the kind of violent rhetoric that a lot of Democrats have complained about if Republicans use it. And he was kind of irritated to be asked about that. But I do think the greater problem for him was not his sort of presidential irritation at being questioned. It was the fact that he was mumbling again, that he was not making all that much sense. I mean, every time he does this, it reminds the American people that this is not a condition that gets better. He didn't have a cold. I mean, that's not what caused the problem at the debate. It is age related cognitive problems, and they're not going away, and they're going to get worse. So I think every time he actually tries to fix the problem, he actually exacerbates the problem.
Yeah, I think, and this is beginning to be reflected, I think, in the polls. CNN came out with a poll which suggested that Trump might win 330 electoral college seats, which is approaching a landslide. And there's internal polling from in the Democratic Party, which is being reported, which suggests that the Democratic Party would not do any better if it were to replace Joe Biden with Kamala Harris. So they're in desperate straits. And the question of Kamala Harris brings up the final question, which is that she is going to have to face President Trump's Veep pick, who is J.D. Vance. Now, he's a pick who sort of means that Trump is doubling down on his blue-collar appeal. He's not everybody's favorite pick, but he's very smart. He has a great resume, and there must be a suspicion, given his speaking abilities and intelligence, that he's going to really rip Vice President Kamala Harris to pieces in this debate.
Certainly a lot of Republicans here in Milwaukee think that. And now sometimes things don't turn out like you think they're going to, but clearly Vice President Harris has kind of created a new recipe for word salad. I mean, it's amazing the stuff that she says, where she just engages in strange circular rhetoric. But Vance is very, very sharp. I would actually recommend Ross Dowd of the New York Times did an interview with him maybe a month ago. So it was not totally about being vice president. And he's just incredibly sharp, really, really insightful fellow. And so I think it looks bad for Vice President Harris. And that poll, that internal poll that you mentioned, the Democratic poll, is really, really terrible, because it says Democratic voters would be very happy to vote for a ticket that had nothing to do with the Biden administration, not Joe Biden, not Kamala Harris. Can we just get some new people all together? That's pretty bad when you have the current president and vice president seeking re-election.
Yeah, it's really bad. We're going to have to leave it there, Byron. And thanks very much again for joining me on Political Perspectives. This doesn't look like toning down at any point between now and the November election, and we'll be back to talk about it some more. I want to thank everybody else for joining us on Political Perspectives, and we'll see you again next time.